Thanks.
Let's see.
Carl. Okay. So welcome and thanks for coming, everybody, to this week's edition of Popular Music Books in Process, a joint project of IASPM US, the Journal of Popular Music Studies, and the POP Conference. I'm Carl Wilson, one of the series organizers, along with Eric Weisbart and Kimberly Mack. Before we get started, I'd just like to let you know that videos for most of our previous sessions are available to view on Eric Weisbart's YouTube page, including last week's session on Billy Joel and popular music studies. Catch up on the ones you've missed and share them so we can extend the series reach beyond those who are able to join us at this time every week. Also, because we're still going to be dealing with the pandemic for some months to come, in the next week or so, we're going to be putting out a call for proposals to the series for 2021. So keep an eye out for that and share it with anyone you think might be right to contribute. Coming up next Tuesday, we have Joanna Love talking about her book in progress, Turf Wars, Popular Music and Political Resistance at America's Super Bowl, and an update to the schedule here. She'll be joined by Steve Waxman discussing his forthcoming book, Live Music in America, A History from Jenny Lind to Jay-Z. But this week we're joined by Kyra Gaunt with her book in progress, Played, Twerking at the Intersection of Music, YouTube, and Violence Against Black Girls, in conversation with an amazing panel of Aria Halliday, Regina Bradley, and Alisha Jones. They'll be talking for 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have another 20 minutes for Q&A facilitated by Eric. So please put questions as you think of them in the chat space, and Eric will use them to call on you to unmute and present them at the end. Of course, you can also put your comments in the chat, which we'll share with the presenters after the event. So now I'll just quickly introduce our participants. Digital ethnomusicologist Kyra Gaunt teaches at the University of Albany, SUNY. Her first book, The Games Black Girls Play, Learning the Ropes from Double Dutch to Hip Hop, won the Merriam Prize from the Society for Ethnomusicology, and her subsequent publications contributed to the emergence of Black girlhood studies and hip hop feminism. Her TED video, How the Jump Rope Got Its Rhythm, reached over 7 million views and was translated into 28 languages. You can check that out. Aria Halliday is Assistant Professor of Gender and Women's Studies and African American and Africana Studies at the University of Kentucky, where she specializes in 20th and 21st century Black women's and girls' cultural production. She's editor of the Black Girlhood Studies collection, and her book, Beyond Barbie, is under contract with the University of Illinois Press. Regina Bradley is a writer and researcher of African American life and culture, with an emphasis on the contemporary American South. She's the Assistant Professor of English and African Diaspora Studies at Kennesaw State University and the author of the upcoming Chronicling Sticonia, The Rise of the Hip Hop South from UNC Press. And Alisha Jones is an Assistant Professor in the Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology at Indiana University. Her book, Flaming, The Peculiar Theopolitics of Fire and Desire in Black Male Gospel Performance, was published in April by Oxford University Press and was the subject of an extremely memorable popular music books in process session that you can still see on YouTube, and I urge you to do that if you haven't. And so now, with no further ado, let's take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric, for this entire series. It has provided a much needed influx into being at home all the time. And for me in particular, reinserting myself in the conversation of popular music scholars, because I've been away from what was well, it's still EMP, but Mopop was a new thing for me. And so I know all of us miss being out and about in Seattle and elsewhere. So thank you for all the work that you do behind the scenes for this and for the conferences that have 20 years of conferences. And I also want to thank my guests. I invited Dr. Jones, Dr. Bradley, and Dr. Halliday, who I'm going to call by your first names, I'm sorry, during our conversation, because this is going to be a sister circle kind of a thing. My lighting is going to be uncooperative, so we'll go this way. And let's see what we're going to do. There we go. I blame the Shirley card, if you don't. I blame the Shirley card for this, technologist that I am. I'm going to share some bits and pieces of things. I'm going to, let me share my screen real quick. I'm going to talk through some of the core concepts from the book. And then I'm going to open it up. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to open it up for a dialogue. I've invited these queens to be here with me because one, I'd like to push myself to get my book proposal off my desk. And two, I think that there's something valuable about having intergenerational conversation among Black women publicly, so that you can appreciate that there are many facets to these jewels. And I'd love to do collaborative work. So let me share my screen and open up this. Can you see Played and the little girl? Okay, perfect. So since 2012, when I began to look for a new subject to study other than my first book, The Games Black Girls Play, and looking at kinetic orality and somatic historiography of the hidden musicianship of Black girls, I wanted to, I grew up as a TV boo tube baby. I was a latchkey kid, an only child. And so television played a huge role in my formation around popular music, including my boombox, which I made my cassettes on in my bedroom by myself with Donnie Simpson, if you're from DC or know Video Soul, who was a family friend as well. And I grew up around a lot of musicians, but I didn't. I had a very traumatic childhood, so I don't really even remember it. My mother even took care of Gil Scott-Heron's dog, and the dog was so lost that loved my mother so much that it ran away when she took it back. I have that background, and in many ways, this book is an outcome of my childhood experience, my tween and teenage experience, even my late teenage experience around the onset of my sexuality, around emotional and psychological abuse that happened during that period of my life. And that music was, the way that I kept myself, accompanied the pain that I felt that I went through as an introvert and an only child. And so this study came out of when I was looking for something to do, I lucked upon a Freaks, French Montana video called Freaks that on March 8th, 2013 had been released on YouTube and had reached 900,000 views, which then was unprecedented in 24 hours. And I was struck by that Nicki Minaj had her breasts, for me, fully exposed with some pasties on them, colored, flesh tone pasties. And I thought, this is wrong. And this set me on to a journey of discovering, how generational shifts happen. How we forget the curse of knowledge, how we forget what it was to be an adolescent in your bedroom, finding yourself, finding your own voice, and that included sexuality and sensuality and dancing for Black girls and finding a way to connect to other people through dance. And that sometimes we forget that when we're watching media that we find doesn't match up with the ways that privacy worked when you were a kid. And so therefore you clutch your pearls and think, oh my God, this is horrible. And that's how I began this project. But over the course of what has been a 5-year period of intense research since 2015, I have come to a different place, and I've worked collaboratively with my undergraduate students in about 5 different classes, about 90 different students from a very diverse background, from conservative Hasidic Jew in a class with 5 biracial Black identified women, and fathers and students from Nepal. I've learned so much in collaborating around this research. So I'm going to try to give you a sense of what the project is, read a bit of things. But in the beginning, I thought I'm studying the unintended consequences of growing up online as an adolescent Black girl, where not managing one's presence and privacy can be more costly than their non-Black counterparts, especially for the most vulnerable girls of color on the mobile web. And so as I begin, I just want to make a quick reference to acknowledging the stolen land. I'm here in Mohawk, and I learned how to say this the other day, but I didn't write it down now, so I'm going to mispronounce it. Haudenosaunee. I wrote it down, but I've forgotten that quick. Just that this is still a really important acknowledgement to make. We don't inherit the land from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. I heard that the other day and thought that was very good to add. And I'm not going to play much of this.
Thank you, guys.
But I also think it's important to hear the voice of white people who are aligning themselves with Black Lives Matter. And this is the group, the neo-soul group Moonchild. And this is from December of 2019. But when you hear her talk, you might find that she's beginning to talk like it's COVID. You'll see what I mean.
Thank you. We are in the middle of a U.S. tour, and at every show we take a minute to say a little something. Didn't feel right to be here today without doing the same thing, so I'm just going to talk for a minute about a way we can all continue to contribute to the fight for people of color that, in my experience, gets left out of the conversation, and that is signing up to make monthly donations to organizations that are fighting for Black and brown lives. There are so many incredible organizations filled with people who are dedicating their lives and their expertise to fighting for change in ways that many of us aren't able to or we're not qualified to. But what we can do is give them the consistent monthly financial support that they need to continue the important work that they're doing. We usually highlight a local organization depending on what city we're in, but since this is going on the internet, please do some research wherever you are. There's amazing organizations all around. And if everyone who knows that Black and brown lives matter was giving whatever they could on a monthly basis, our collective financial power is huge, and we have to take advantage of that. There's a lot that I don't know. There's a lot that I can't speak to as a privileged white person. But if we want to show true solidarity, we have to be doing this. It is our responsibility to spend our privilege this way. To quote the activist Brittany Packnett, "The privilege you enjoy comes at someone else's expense. The privilege that you're hoarding could be put to good use. It could be used to create space, opportunity, resources, and amplification for someone else. Not because they need your saving, but because that's what you do with what you didn't earn. You give it away. So it's not charity, it's solidarity. And true solidarity means showing up respectfully, physically, mentally, and financially. So please, if you aren't already, go home tonight and sign up to make monthly donations. And if you are, just remember that as you grow professionally and financially, your responsibility to give grows with you. So spend your privilege. I love that. So I want to begin for about 10 to 15 minutes with the words of a 16-year-old Black girl / young woman named Michaela Gilliam. I met her in 2015 at the Columbia conference that I helped organize with Farah Jasmine Griffin and Amy Meredith Cox and Salamisha Tillett, just a wonderful array, Camille A. Brown and dancers organizing this conference called the Black Girl Movement. And I'm just going to jump into this quote that Michaela, who is 16, who I swear is
Audre Lorde reincarnated, said she was talking about the Baltimore uprisings from 2015. The picture is not related, but I think it is a great image to read this quote from Michaela from, and I've gotten to know her and her mom very well. We're walking down one of the main streets in downtown Baltimore, and it's surrounded by whiteness, white money. It's very neoliberal, and me and two other girls that I just met at the protest were just standing in the middle of the intersection twerking. In Baltimore, Black women and Black girls have been reclaiming their femininity, have been reclaiming and making spaces for themselves, making transient zones of freedom for themselves, inserting their sexuality, inserting their intersectional identities, inserting their fluidity, creating space for ourselves to be embraced. And that's what it means. And that's what being a movement baby looks like for me in Baltimore. It's just a way to reclaim my identity. This book is very much about creating a frame for people to think about the ways in which that identity is difficult to claim in public. And it has everything to do with the bombardment of music as an ecological threat to Black girls that I think we often overlook. I've come to really pay attention to the ways in which we are embedded in sound waves and lyrics on sound waves, where music becomes a kind of enabling aspect of the gender-based violence that Black girls suffer at 3 times the national average before the age of 16. It's not just intimate partner violence in dating or physical violence. It's mostly, I would assert, emotional and psychological violence. I've had to resort to using, or not even resort, I needed to use for studying on YouTube, both quantitative and qualitative data approaches and research methods in order to understand how YouTube, a wickedly complex site for the distribution and discovery of music, which I think that ethnomusicologists and musicologists in academia are sleeping on. We need to catch up with what's going on in these spaces. So I've been teaching my students how to do qualitative research, but also to think about the quantitative side of things. And so these are 2 images that I use in my classroom. One just outlines the difference between quantitative and qualitative data, right? Things that you can count, made with instruments such as rulers, balances. On YouTube, it's view counts, engagement, the demographics for early on. I began to notice that girls seem to rank highly in the first 3 slots of whose eyes had the most attention towards particularly rap songs, explicit rap songs in particular, that females ages 13 to 17 and 18 to 24 were the top 3 demographics for most of those videos, not unlike French Montana's Freaks video featuring Nicki Minaj. But I also began to notice what was going on below the comments, which was qualitative data, which includes using your senses to observe the results. Not only my eyes, my ears, but also my body, my memories, my body as an instrument for understanding those things. And so doing qualitative research in a collaborative network then allows me to have Asian bodies and South Asian bodies, East Asian bodies, white, female, and male bodies, interacting with the content collaboratively so that we see how we see things differently about Black girls who twerk online. And then I found this image that showed the difference between quantitative and qualitative around a parody. Black girls and Black culture is always the butt of a joke to train people in something. When I first started my career at UVA, I got a mailer, a band mailer someone put in my mailbox. And on the back, it had a little grid for how to put together a rap. I do my rap, I sit on your lap, I have the ambition to be an obstetrician, bust a rhyme. And it had a little grid and you could just pick any and create a rap back in 1996. And so this one says, quantitative rap. Numerous attempts were made to measure the volume, density, elasticity of the butt. However, the subject refused repeatedly and became hostile. Qualitative rap. The butt was approximately spherical in shape, light brown, and firm, yet yielding to pressure. Interesting, right? So I began to collect data with my students. It was a summer course in 2014, actually, we started. And I had about 23 students collect 10 videos every week, using the search engine to search for Black girls twerking videos. I asked those students to imagine that they were Black girls searching for content. I said, imagine that, you know, if you're Asian, you adopted or you had a Black girl come live with you for a semester or for a year in school, and that you were searching on their behalf as part of your family. I wanted them to take an empathic positionality in conducting the research that we did. So they had to invent that for themselves. They also began by interviewing 3 people in their lives, a friend, a stranger in their work life, and someone else of their choice, to tell them that they were taking a twerking class to see what their reactions would be. And of course, a lot of the reactions you can imagine were predictable. Many of them were, I can't believe they're using my tax dollars to teach that. That's not appropriate. Mothers and fathers saying certain things. So we began to see this kind of ecological landscape in which twerking is arising. And during one of the early classes, when we collected this data in spreadsheets, in a Google spreadsheet, a video of an 8-year-old girl came up. We showed it in class to each other, and I'm not going to show you the video because of, to protect her identity, one, to not be like Jim Derogatis and be peddling porn by trying to expose something like you did with the victims of R. Kelly, to not pass that. That's actually a federal offense to pass images of young children through media. But I will tell you, I call her Ruby. I call her Ruby because twerking began as bounce culture in New Orleans in the late 1980s. And Ruby is the name of the first, of Ruby Nell Bridges, who integrated the New Orleans public schools, the first integrated school in the South. And I thought it was fitting that we would call her Ruby. She's in her bedroom. She appears to be a British-speaking Black girl. You know, one of the things that became apparent in doing this work is, how do you know who's Black and who's not? We use a lot of visual information to assume that people are Black. A lot of my students would eventually show me videos of things, and I'd be, well, that's not a Black girl. And so it made all of this kind of social constructions of racism become quite apparent. And so she's in her bedroom, there's a TV in the background, and her little brother is filming her. And it almost mimics what a music video scene would look like. She's down on her knees with her butt facing the camera, and there's no music. They're not playing. They're playing in their bedroom, but they're not playing along with any copywritten musical content. She is singing along as she pops her left and right cheek, which doesn't really have much at 8, but she's trying. And she's like, bum, 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 bum. And her little 5-year-old he appears to be younger than her brother says, shh, like shuts her up, and just, is expecting her to just use her body to perform for the camera. The video had 600 views when I first found it. I flagged the content. Nothing ever happens. You get a little announcement that you'll be contacted by someone immediately. Months passed. It had almost 2,000 views. And so I began to perform around this content when I would speak about it in public, that it occurred to me how many, I can ask this audience the same question I ask in face-to-face presentations. How many of you have been in the bedroom of a 6-year-old Black girl? And when it comes to integrated audiences, it tends to be very few who are not Black. And that's because we still live in the United States in highly segregated residential spaces. Even Brooklyn is a highly segregated, Brooklyn, New York is a highly segregated county. So when you are in your not very integrated spaces and you're watching content by an 8-year-old girl, things happen with you that are a function of context collapse. So one of my students that the day that we found this was like, that's her video. And it occurred to me for the first time that we were not watching her video. We were watching someone who had downloaded her video onto their channel. And we had this debate in the class. It was a young Russian woman who twerked, and she felt quite, a lot of ownership over the content and the subject of the content we were studying. And we argued for about 5 minutes about whose video this was. We also began to take note of the content below the video. And this is a comment that appeared below this video and stayed on the channel. Even when content is age restricted, it remains in the YouTube archive. And it said, wow, she's good. She's cute, thick, and she wasn't scared to show her skills. She just had on too many clothes. Let her twerk in her panties so she can really show off. If you have Kick Me. That's the Kick messaging app. And he leaves his username so we can talk. Kick at that time, this would have been 2014, was under investigation by the FTC for child sexual exploitation. Almost every one of the apps, from Kick to YouTube to what was Musical.ly and now is TikTok, has been under investigation by the FTC for child sexual exploitation. And globally, gender-based violence is an epidemic. And I want you to just think about that inside of the syndemics that we are experiencing right now with COVID and with Black Lives Matter and with the economic aspects of what COVID has done around the world, that most girls are at home with their perpetrators of violence, that people will perpetrate violence against them. And so we already had increasing numbers about this. So before I go on, I'm going to read a little segment from, to give a little context. So the United States, we have about 330 million people in the United States. It's estimated that 1.2 million hours a day are spent listening to music among Americans. That's equivalent to 2,000 lifetimes based on an average lifespan of 75 years. Various studies have shown that Black children tend to consume more music and media than their counterparts. Music is one of the most watched and most profitable categories of user-generated content on YouTube. Gaming is the one that vies with it. And it's gaming, even the composition of music and the production of music for gaming. Those two categories vie for the top spot. With over 600 hours of mobile video uploaded every minute, it is nearly impossible to protect girls from sexual grooming like the comment that you saw. Not to mention to resist the pull, the naive pull to want to be a part of broadcasting yourself on YouTube, just like their non-Black counterparts. They want to be a part of the freedom to express themselves and their self-interest, which includes twerking. The definition of twerking that I use in the book is based on Big Frida's definition. Popping, lock, I added the popping, locking, dropping because I see so many connections to hip-hop dance. Popping, locking, dropping, and bouncing your booty like a basketball to the beats and rhymes of a rap song. So freedom of expression, or owning your own body as you broadcast yourself, actually plays a role, it's not their fault, in amplifying misogynoir, the sexualization of girls, and the weaponization of twerking videos. as in the Juicy J contest from 2013, in which he tweeted that he was going to give away $50,000 and then made a song called Scholarship. $50,000 scholarship you could win if you posted a video of yourself on YouTube. It was a contest sponsored by World Star Hip Hop, and they used the YouTube platform to solicit content for this contest. You had to sign away just by uploading your video to the website, to the platform. You were giving permission for ownership of your name, your video content, your identity in that image in perpetuity. You had to be 21 and up by their rules, but just before they took down all of this content off the World Star Hip Hop site, because it was featured there until the contest ended, about 60,000 videos were uploaded by the search results count onto YouTube. And most of them were of white women, of white single moms that I watched. And I was just about to start a research project when all of that material on the World Star Hip Hop was taken down. What is common to publishing offline with books and particularly books, is that things go out of print. Things on YouTube and on websites often go out of print, but particularly around things that may show misogyny and misogynoir against Black girls and women, or if it's something empowering, it may disappear because those sites are not well funded. So I'm looking at this wickedly complex structure or matrix of domination that happens around the content. The constant circulation of their content, meaning that if I upload it onto YouTube, it is persistently and permanently in the archive, no matter what your channel may tell you. So the constant circulation of this content engenders and amplifies attention to the way audiences view it as grotesque, humorous, sexualized, or pornographic, and the ways that sexual and privacy predators exploit the data that is on the back of young girls' content. In 2011, former Attorney General Eric Holder framed age as a critical aspect of increasing patterns of child sexual exploitation online. He said at a conference, "Unfortunately, we've seen a historic rise in the distribution of child pornography, in the number of images being shared online, in the level of violence associated with child exploitation and sexual abuse crimes. Tragically, the only place we've seen a decrease is in the age of the victims." In the data set that I have of about 1,000 videos, but I focus on 600 of them, there is a clear mirroring going on if you read the way audiences are looking at watching Black girls twerking videos, between what they perceive to be crotch shots when girls are in their bedrooms, essentially playing in quite appropriate, culturally appropriate dance behavior for adolescent and pre-adolescent Black girls from across around the diaspora. It's collapsed with the idea that it looks like a crotch shot from porn. So it's not really a crotch shot when it's the girls playing in their bedroom. But they may be appearing in their underwear. They may be in Sophie shorts, as my students told me, these kind of little skimmies. We call them skimmies when I was in high school that cheerleaders wear, or short shorts. And this causes a collapse in the way that audiences see it and project their stereotypes, the ones they already held before they even saw the video, of that Black girls are hypersexual and that they definitely aren't in need of protecting. So that empathy gap and adultification bias that shows up is right there for many audiences. And the musical aspect that I'm not going to spend too much time talking about, let me see if I have, is that, excuse me, if I make a video with content that is copywritten, that's owned by rights holders, YouTube's Content ID system, which is, several of you probably know this. I know there's some wonderful scholars on the call that do research around this. YouTube's Content ID is a system that tracks monetizes and blocks any sound or film content that you upload in your user-generated content so that it can track it for rights holders. So that means that if I take Soulja Boy's song Dunk, which was the 4th single from his first studio album, which was danced to by the original Twerk team, who were 18-year-olds who started a YouTube channel that led to the trend of twerking in many ways on the platform before 2013, before Miley Cyrus. They started in 2009. Their first channel was launched in 2009. Whenever they made videos where they were dancing, the artists, the emerging artists, would profit from that, and the record labels would profit from it, and Vivo profits from it. And so everybody's profiting from this content but the Black girl, who tends to not get a lot of views because of the way people view it. But if a white girl does it, it gets more views. So I found a video of the 1,000 videos I collected with my students over a 8-month period. Not one of them, they were all uploaded between 2006 and 2014, but we only collected from summer of 2014 to the beginning of January 2015. None of the videos that we randomly collected with 25 different people were over 900,000 views. The average was about 20,000 views across the entire data set. I found one video randomly of 2 white girls twerking. They were teenagers, probably 16, 17. My students said they looked like cheerleaders. They were both wearing the same cheerleader kind of paraphernalia. The video had 6 million views over the years that I watched it grow from 4 million views. So Black girls are doubly exploited, and they're doubly losing out on what broadcasting yourself is all about on the platform. And so I'm just going to give you one little insight from, and so I look at, in the data set, there's 200 songs. All of them are by rappers, with the exception of one song by D'Angelo and 5 female artists who appear. Katie Got Bands from Chicago, she's an indie rap artist. Ciara, Beyonce, and of course Nicki Minaj's Anaconda. And there's one other artist who is a feature, a white rapper who's a feature, is kind of unknown. But most of the 200 songs are by Case Styles. He's especially appealing to tween YouTube twerkers. He is an artist out of Kansas City who calls himself the King of Twerk. He launched his career on YouTube. Tyga is in that. He and Soulja Boy launched their careers on YouTube. And so I'm looking at all of these associations. It's just what I call a wickedly complex structure or matrix of domination at work that I think we've been overlooking because it's just so ubiquitous. And I'm just gonna, this is a taxonomy that I've been developing of all of the different dances that get collapsed and called twerking that really are not twerking. So the same way that we think one Black girl looks like another, then a Black girl dancing some dance that looks like twerking looks like everything else. So I've been trying to parse that out. I have a new piece coming out in a book on Black women's cultural production that talks about, is twerking African? And then I have my students do performative practice things where we put our shoes and views in the same place that people we're studying do. Since we're not doing face-to-face field work or research, how do we get a sense of what people do? We do what they do. Carrie Miller calls it DIY ethnography. Do it yourself. Do what the people you study do. And so this is an example of what I do in my classes. Pick a song. I would ask everybody, maybe in the chat, what's a song that you remember you came of age sexually to when you were a teen or a tween that you just loved? That song, and so or who's the artist? For me, it was Shaka Khan. And so what I have my students do then is to make user-generated content so they can see how it works and what that process is, and learn some of the things that are hidden from our view when you upload, which is you often, even as an adult, I would make content but I don't need to watch the content I made online, right? So I'm not even going to be my first view. Somebody else is going to be my first view. And so I would always tell my students, make sure you're the first person to see your content on YouTube. And this is one that I made. And it couldn't be
Hello, you. Welcome to. This is Professor G, and welcome to my home studio. This is my first vlog of 2019, and this is your teenage dream. I am going to be doing a react video to an assignment that I gave my students in my YouTube music and sexuality class called, the video is You Got the Love by Rufus featuring Shaka Khan. That was my thing when I was somewhere between, I'd say 9, 10, or 11, I fell in love with Shaka Khan. And so I'm going to be reacting to You Got the Love from Soul Train. There's a YouTube video. This is, I always look for videos that are on women's channels. This is, I can't tell, it's called My Rhythm Soul TV. It has 22, this channel has 22,000 subscribers, and this particular video is called Rufus featuring Shaka Khan, You Got the Love, plus interview from Soul Train 1974. So let's see, 1974. I was born in 62, so I was about 12 years old. And I probably saw this on YouTube, on Soul Train, because I watch Soul Train every Saturday at 10 a.m. in Washington, D.C. area. And so, how many views does this have?
I'll speed it up a little bit because I just want you to get a sense.
Oh, I used to love watching Soul Train. And I used to just think that Shaka Khan was the sexiest thing going. I don't know if I said that to myself, but it was the way she moved.
I'm going to dance here for 60 times.
And it was all that hair. Like black girls have this thing, you know, we used to put a towel on our head and pretend we had long hair. Right.
Okay, so just to give you a sense of the kind of research methods that I use for this. And so gender inequality. The study of gender is the lens through which we most clearly see inequality, wrote Ellen Koskoff in her book, A Feminist Ethnomusicology in 2014. And I think this is a great way to open it up to have a conversation with my sister circle here. Just to give you a glimpse of the kind of work I'm doing, I sent a link. If you didn't get it, I'll make sure before we leave that I put it in the chat to my academic EDU page where I wrote an article called Disclosure, Disconnect, and it's such a long title, I can't remember, about the aspirational tween content on YouTube. It's a long article that kind of documents the methods and the research that we did, and a little précis of the book proposal. So let me call into the circle Dr. Alisha Jones. Actually, she's going to have to depart. I took up all the time. Totally forgive me. It's my show. I can do that, can't I? If you want to say a few words and then bolt, please do, because I know you have to leave right now, in fact.
Awesome. Well, I've been following this new research, and you know, I've been a fan. I'll say publicly that your research on Black girls saved this Black girl's life as a researcher and doctoral student. I've told you that privately, but it definitely meant a lot to see a reflection of myself in the literature. You asked me to kind of just reflect a little bit on the ways in which this research might connect with mine, and I appreciate the invitation to do so. I'm struck by just the prospect of twerking. See, this is why I love you. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much. I want to say that in many ways, as I mentioned, your research helped to embolden me to take seriously the colloquialisms of our culture as serious sites of inquiry. When I hurt my back trying to do capoeira, not capoeira itself, but just trying to be the most after taking capoeira, I went to a physical therapist, and the physical therapist had me to do a series of moves, and the visuals of which look a lot like twerking. And so I came to the realization in that moment how twerking can be for my health, my cultural health, my physical vitality. But I also realized that people who were not privy to the conversation that precipitated that physical therapy might view what was going on in a whole different light, not as something that was nourishing, that was helping me manage pain, that was helping me with the range of motion, that it was for my health. The similar sorts of misrecognitions I experienced in doing my research in flaming, with the chapter you can recall, pole dancing for Jesus. One of the main things that I realized as I interviewed people and did surveys of folks as they got acquainted with my research was that the mere prospect of viewing a man using pole fitness in order to express closeness to God was anxiety inducing. People couldn't even get past that prospect to click on the video. And then once they clicked on the video, I noticed that it was specifically white queer men that had difficulty articulating how they experienced viewing a Black man on the pole expressing closeness to God. And it was through dance research that I was able to think critically about the gaze in the US context. Many would say in dance research that because of customs that were shaped by different strands of thought like Victorianism, white men, white queer men, do not have to look upon the Black male body, let alone look upon the worshiping Black male body. And when they are made to through the work of Alvin Ailey or Bill Jones, there can emerge a cognitive dissonance, a way where there might be, for some, a simultaneous moment of envy, admiration, and also being repelled by what they're coming to terms with. And it was very much that moment of observing them having frustration and articulating that experience that I was able to dig deeper into the sorts of visual symbols that were latent in something that was everyday to me, watching a person worship. And so I'm interested in what this will bring about as people come to terms with the exploitation that you reveal in your research, as I've heard you lecture on it, and the inequity of compensation, how these young women or young girls are not technologically equipped or armed in order to benefit from what presumably, if I recall, white men are benefiting from, in terms of monetizing the videos and understanding the whole entrepreneurship that is built upon their moving body for their health, for their joy, for their Black girl joy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I know you're going to bolt, so if she disappears, we know why.
I'm gonna check out your response. I'm gonna check out.
Yes. So in response to that, so in the data set, Black girls, the younger they are, the more they reveal their personal identifying, their name, their face, right. And in the context of it just being play, there's no concern. But in the context of really looking at it like it's some kind of sex work, some kind of informal economy, then you have to look at it like, oh, okay, so the girls don't know that you should hide your face because the audiences will denigrate you and stigmatize what you do. when they start to get older, they wear wigs, they turn their back, they never show their face on the camera. You know, the typical entrance into a YouTube video is that you're bending over to turn on your camera, and then you come back and you turn to the camera and do your thing. The older girls get, the more likely they are to mask their identity so that they're never on camera. The older they get, they start to, well, this is true of women in general, unless they're serious YouTubers, or maybe even all people who use visual social media, is that you first just hang out and mess around. You don't, this thing called homago, hanging out, messing around, geeking out. Geeking out is not something that a lot of Black girls do with the technology. They're geeking out with their bodies. The body is the technology. They are outlining the musical texture with their bodies, emphasizing, you know, the shift in the rhythmic texture, the melodic changes. That's where the geeking out is. When girls are older, I was talking to some friends yesterday. I have girls from 8 years old to 18 in the construction of what I want to focus on in my book, looking at kind of a human development life cycle through twerking, and looking at it from an epidemiological model and a human development life cycle, to use Bronfenbrenner's theory of human development, the ecology of human development, to think about this stuff. And so there's a set of 18-year-old girls who make a video in their mother's living room that's like cheerleading formations of twerking. And then each one does their own. You get your individuality within collectivity. Each one gets their own spotlight. And they've edited the video where their name is underneath with the song that they're dancing to. And at the end, the two of them sit down and do this kind of shout out like 106 in Park. And they're like, this is two of them. It's like after the whole day of a shoot in their living room. And she goes, shout out to Nene and shout out to Shaquan. And the other one's like, shout out to Mimi and Nisi and Shaquan. You said Shaquan. Okay, yeah. And we know y'all hate. And the other girl goes, this is so, to me, such a Black girl thing. She goes, yeah, yeah, gaga. There's this way in which Black girls use nonverbal expression to signify on people who don't like us. She goes, we know y'all hate. We just do this for fun. Yeah, yeah, gaga. And I love that I'm able to allow like the Black girls and the Black people in my class to see these things, discover these insights while we're in collaboration with non-Black people. And it also happens to be that the other side of the coin happens where I've had no Black students in my class. And one of my students who kept taking my class over and over again, I don't understand why, because he was always failing, said one day, I'm so glad there's no Black people in this class. And I was just like, and so this is, you know, it's been my mission to try and kind of like do Sasha Cohen, like to reveal the anti-Black racism and the anti-Black sexism that is at work around twerking. And to also have a politics of care about that Black girls are trying to, this is what I wrote in one passage. I think this really speaks. I wrote this a while ago, but we Black women have been trying, and I would say Black girls have been trying to save this nation with the help of others. And music and dance is often the way we try to save ourselves. So. Regina, Aria, who wants in?
I'll hop in because you ended with talking about how Black girls try to save themselves. And one, I think, you know, I'm a fan of your book, and of all of your work, really. And we have a citational relationship where we write about similar things, but from different vantage points, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, in particular, you know, I write a lot about how twerking is about joy, like to the point where Alisha was talking about, like it is a health thing, it's a thing of joy. It connects you to your body, it connects you to you know, other girls. I had an article that came out with cultural studies earlier this year about twerking called Twerk Some, and it was really about like the kind of relationship that Black girls have to each other, right, when they're twerking. And I think what's interesting about your work and what you've presented is that, you know, that relationship is shifted when a camera occurs, right? As part of kind of the argument, and that, you know, other people are invited into the cipher who aren't necessarily a part of that conversation or part of that relationship, are not interested in the same types of joy, right, that are happening with the girls in the circle. And so I think that's a very interesting kind of demarcation that you're making, right? You're thinking about like what happens once the video is uploaded, like who is the audience, right? And
Yeah,
one
the,
thing
the
that I
unintended,
talk more,
invisible. Yeah.
yeah, the one thing that I would love to hear you talk more about is ownership, right? So I think a lot of, you know, what I write about is about like the relational kind of connection that Black women have, Black girls have, right, in a space, in spaces that we share, right? And so I'm thinking about, you know, something earlier that you presented and how, you know, you said that you were arguing with a student about like who owns this video.
Yeah.
And it made me think even more about like you deciphering the kind of like what is twerking and what's not twerking. And so I would love to hear more about like how you are kind of piecing together this kind of like techno ownership.
By
Particularly,
Michael. I'm sorry.
particularly for Black girls, and what that means, you know, as I'm interested in, right, related to joy. Like, do we have to own it for it to be?
Yeah. Here's what I'm trying to tease out around the question. It's a really great question. I've gotten fascinated with phenomenology and symbolism, or symbolic interactionism from sociology in particular around this, because you know, one woman's joy is some white person. Listen, last week I gave a talk at Skidmore, and a young white male student, and it came in the Q&A, and he was like, well, you know, like, I don't think my mother is gonna like this. Like, what if my mother doesn't like twerking? She finds it offensive. And all I could say was, I have a Black mother, and there are white things online that she does not like, but we don't have a say. And so it's the fact that symbols are something that stands for something to someone, and that we all can't see that when we're looking from our individual standpoint. And so we need something that zooms out so we can see everything that's happening. That's why the collaborative research. We need to be able to take different theories and show different ways that it may be looked at. But most important, what you're pointing to, Aria, is when do we get the spectrum of Black girls' voices to say, well, this is what, that's why I started with Michaela's voice. This is what this means. This is protest and joy at the same time. Right? And I didn't see that fully until she said it to me, because that's not a part of my 58-year-old experience. Not in from outside looking in. That's my experience with Shaka Khan. It's my experience on the dance floor. It's my experience dancing at protests that I've been at, singing at protests. But that context shifts depending on where you are. The situatedness matters, right? And so the challenge in the book is to try and get the balance right, to make sure that I don't reinscribe that way in which Black girls are always seen, very narrow, very hypervisible, very sexual. So.
Right, and I think too that, you know, there's the part that's about Black girls, I think, and how their bodies are read. And then there's another part, I think, that's about how twerking as a bodily practice, right, as a dance is read, right? And, you know, with you like talking about the different dances that are kind of collapsed into twerking, right? It makes me think about how there are only a certain amount of opportunities, we'll put it like that, right, for something to become popular, right? And so regardless of all the other iterations, like I had somebody write me an email this morning asking me about woken up and like what that means from a Caribbean, woken up, right? From a Caribbean culture, right?
What does that mean for the people who don't know, including me? I think I know because I
We talked about it in presentations. It's like work. It's called working up, right? It's Caribbean dialect, working up, or to dance with your booty. And so like, or what we might, I think is more popular, like whining is a thing that gets called winding up, whatever. So I think it's really interesting when we talk about like what it means to delineate what these different dances mean in their cultures, and what it means for them to be collapsed into twerking, you know, to create this kind of popular dance narrative about how and why twerking is popular as it's connected to Miley Cyrus, right? And not all the other, particularly, which I really love to hear Gina talk about, the kind of Southern Blackness particularities of twerking that I think get dismissed and erased, right, in online platforms.
Girl, I certainly ain't starting with no Miley Cyrus. I know that.
Come on, Regina, bring it.
Thank you so much for including me in this conversation. I have like 11 million thoughts going through my head, but I think we're gonna situate I have a couple of comments, but I think I'm gonna situate it in the narrative that, one, I am a proud Southern Black girl from Southwest Georgia. I came of age in the late 90s and early 2000s, 4.5 hours outside of Atlanta. So Twerk Some was always at the top of the list. But there's a couple of things that I was thinking about. I agree, and I really love the fact that your definition of twerk is situated within bounce. Bounce is such a significant way of thinking about the fluidity of the influence of Black folks' bodies and how we move and how, and I tell my students this all the time, the music tells you one narrative, but the response tells you something totally different. You know what I'm saying? And I think that is important in thinking about the way that twerking translates across intersectional spaces of race, gender, identity. But I think for me, since you brought up Miley, let me get her out of the way real quick. Is that I always find it fascinating that once something is quote unquote discovered by white folks, right? It becomes safe enough for folks to actually celebrate it in a public space. You know what I'm saying? And you can't really get more public than social media. But I also think it's really fascinating that it was legitimized because Miley twerked hip bones. She ain't twerked no ass. It was hip bones that knocked together. And that the dictionary was like, oh, there's this thing. It's called twerking. Meanwhile, those of us, me, were doing twerk stuff back in the early 2000s when Miley was still Hannah Montana, you know what I mean? So it's like
Hannah Montana, when she was born,
yeah,
I went to New Orleans for the first time in 2011, and this cab driver was like, oh, like to work, just you say, I'm going to work, I'm going to twerk it. I'm just going to twerk it. And it's about the social clubs in New Orleans. And he was like, this is not about, I was like, how old do you think that word is? He was like 90, like 88.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, so that's when Miley was born. And then my data set demonstrates this because I have videos from New Orleans. I can tell because of the Trigger Man beat. I have music from New Orleans from 2006 on YouTube. Yeah. And the key that I haven't told people is that 2005, when YouTube was launched, Hurricane Katrina happened.
Right.
And that dispersion of people, that was the way, because it was a free platform and young people knew about it. That was the way they shared content, kept stuff alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and then even for me, even before, what happened with Soulja Boy in 08 on MySpace with the, Superman joint, it was Yin Yang Twins in Atlanta with Whistle While You Twerk in 2003, you know, or even as far, you know, 1999, Back That Ass Up, which is the international Southern rap anthem still. But the reason that I bring that up is one of the things I find fascinating, and I'm really excited to see how this plays out in your work, is that in the South, in particular, you know, Black cultural expression is such a blurred experience, meaning that you have a little bit of the sacred, a little bit of the secular, and they collide in really intriguing ways, while also grappling with this idea of, you know, respectability politics, which is still a very big thing, and how you sneak around respectability politics when, you know, you sneak to get on YouTube, you know what I'm saying? Like for me, it was sneaking to get on the telephone on three-way, you know what I'm saying? Now it's, you have your secret Instagram channel or your secret YouTube channel, and this is where you put your real stuff. So I'm really excited to see how you navigate those multiple fault lines in identifying how twerking especially is grounded in Southern Blackness in ways that move away from thinking about Southernness and Southern Blackness in such a flat way. Like normally, if like folks think about the South, still, they're just like, they automatically resort to a Faulkner or country music. And all of that is definitely part of the Southern cultural landscape. But it's also this understanding that the South evolves after these major historical milestones, and we need to find ways to document that. And I think twerking is part of that archive. Like twerking is an archive. It's also a reflection of the different ways that twerking has manifested outside of these spaces where they were expected to kind of like stay, you know what I'm saying? And I think that when you were talking about Katrina changed everything, right? And it also happened at the same time that we were starting to get to like this digital world, this social media world. So part of it is like, how do you connect the history of the dance and the history of the culture that's not part of social media, that's not grounded in social media, along with the ways that it has manifested and exploded, right? And then the last thing I want to say is I'm definitely just fascinated in the ways that the gaze dictates the type of legibility or illegibility of Black girlhood and Black womanhood. You know what I mean? Like it makes white women legible in a particular, like I'm thinking in particular about that video that gets released, you know, every couple months of the white girl in her Adele braids, and she's in the African village and she thinks she's doing something, and the Black folks around her just looking at her like, y'all look at this, somebody come look at this. You know what I mean? And putting that in conversation with, you know, the idea of the very real reality of exploitation of Black girls in these exact same spaces, right? Like how do we translate the significance of currency, right? Not necessarily just money, but also relevance, protection even, and how we do those things. So I'm super excited to see how all of these things come together in what sounds to be a very dynamic project. So thank you so much for taking this on. Yeah.
Thank you. Gina, that's your book or your student's book. Mine is, I'm trying to tease out the freedom of speech stuff around Two Live Crew.
Mm-hmm.
And the way in which even Killer Mike is on Joe Rogan's YouTube channel talking about, you know, even my wife accompanies me so I can go to the titty bars. And that's why I want free speech. I want free speech. I'm like, so where's the free speech for Black women?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the free speech for Black girls? Where can a Black girl, anybody sing a Black girl song? Yeah. Bring her out to know herself and to Saki Shange. Where is that in the space? Like we create the content, we made Soulja Boy. It was the original twerk team and Donk that made Soulja Boy. There's a group of Black girls from Baltimore who are dancing to some unknown rap group. They don't even have enough views. They got more views. The girls got more views than they do. But the comments then throw it back in the wrong way, you know, back to the stigmatizations, back to the misogynoir, you know, and then the artists, Drake, Lil Wayne, all of them, that aspect I'm looking at because, you know, they just dismiss what they're doing as making fun and just having fun. And then YouTube, what you said about the yin yang twins, I tried to update the twerking article on Wikipedia, and for a couple of years, I couldn't have anything that was from the perspective you were just talking about, from Black perspectives, wouldn't stick on Wikipedia because it didn't fit the white narrative, the popular, the post-popular narrative. So yeah, there's a lot here. I think I have 2 books for that matter, but I think it's going to open up a space for people from your generation and younger to begin to write that into the needed archive around it. So, okay. So shall we, I don't know what we can do. We're 10, 12 minutes over. So I want to refer to our dear friend, Eric, here.
Here, let me unmute myself as I attempt to talk into a muted microphone. We should wrap things up relatively soon. Only a couple of people have put questions directly on the table, and in a sense, you've conducted a dynamic Q&A with your sister circle. So you did both. That's impressive. But let's bring Larissa Mann into the conversation if she's there.
So, if possible, Lauren. Thank you. Lauren is an expert in this domain, so I would love if she.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear from Anne if she has anything.
Yeah, no, those are the 3
people
in
the chat, and I'll welcome that as well.
Yeah, Larissa, are you still there?
Oh yeah. Yes, thank you. I'm happy to go. Hi.
No, please. I'm not trying to.
Cool. I was just asking, I was struck in the very beginning or earlier on what you were talking about privacy and intimacy as so important as one of the things that can be sort of gained or lost as these images circulate. And so I'm curious in sort of how people create those moments. Like I see online a lot of obfuscation and being impenetrable and using, inner facing codes versus outer facing codes, which only works so far. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how people try to construct or defend their own intimacy and privacy, and also maybe in relation to this idea of they're not allowed to profit, but what does profiting from your image do also? Like, how does that relate to privacy, right? Entrepreneurship and monetizing can work maybe against some aspects of intimacy and privacy, as well as being liberating in other contexts. So trying to think about sort of how folks are striving for maybe autonomy in those different realms, right? Like the kind of intimacy stuff and the recompense side.
This, I'll try and keep this short, but we could talk more and you can feel free to reach out to me on this. For me, there's an issue about voice at stake. So the autonomy of voice, and I don't mean literal voice, I mean political agency voice. So I learned this from my students. There was a brown skinned girl from Trini culture, Trini Indian woman who uploaded it. She was so excited. She was gonna do the whisper challenge as her way, because she was like, I can't twerk, so I'm gonna do the whisper challenge, which was common at the time we were doing the research. She got her sister in the room and they were doing the whisper challenge. And when she uploaded the video, the first comment was sexualized and she freaked the fuck out. I don't want to be on YouTube anymore. Came to me after class and there was nothing sexual about my video. This is a form of gaslighting. It makes Black girls and brown girls it makes white girls crazy that wasn't your intent. So what does it mean that every time you try to assert yourself, you get slapped back in one way? You don't have any autonomy. You can't own how you want to present yourself in public. And so for me, I'm interested in the ecological dynamic of that, not just individually, but collectively, sociologically. So does that mean that I have to be, this is not a criticism this is not personal, what I'm about to say about the artists I'm going to talk about. I'm analyzing this from a sociological perspective. The fact that Megan Thee Stallion's name comes from the idea that older men, sexualize younger girls. And the fact that she had to put an op-ed in the New York Times to defend herself, like this defensive pose where you're constantly, like Toni Morrison would say, this is a waste of time. you're constantly having to defend yourself. You're not even defending your voice. You're defending that no one hears you and that your intention will not be heard. It's, I find that it's inane how much energy we have to put towards trying to reclaim our voice. And so it makes sense to me that girls don't want to have their voice on the camera. They just want to do their thing. And then you're not going to contradict anything I say. And you're not going to understand what I'm doing with my dance anyhow. Yeah, yeah, gaga. So I just think that the costs of it are a high price for all of us to have to. As a woman at this hip hop conference that I went to in New Orleans said, I thought I was using hip hop, but I learned that hip hop was using me. And this thing. And so the last thing I'll say about that is that I think I'm coming to the place where I'm saying, this is what you have to do to be a woman in a patriarchal society. There is nothing inherent. It is what you need to do to find out that patriarchy is worthy of being smashed because it won't allow you, unless you start talking the P word, patriarchy, not pussy. When you start talking the P word, then you can start to know, okay, which group will really give me power? There's a wonderful article called The Social Harms of Bitch. And they basically make the argument, it's a collaborative piece, that there is no organization for bitches. So the Now is a feminist organization. There are organizations to fight patriarchy, but there isn't an organization called the National Association of Bitches that will defend you in court when you get, maligned through the community guidelines of YouTube, that will erase the digital footprints of things that are being misinterpreted about you when you go for a job. And so I do appreciate the multivalence of the word bitch. There's a wonderful YouTube video that's like, bitch is a very multivarious word. Bitch, bitch, bitch. That's important. But the other side, the institutional sides of things, the legislative defense of things, I just want to shed light on, expose this so that we can actually talk about that there's some serious public health issues going on around Black girls, and no one is there to defend them. We don't focus on the marginalized. We focus on the group, all girls. And so Black girls and brown girls and indigenous girls are being left out of the conversation. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you. That was a great question, Larissa.
So we are definitely on the far edges of our time. Can we just do the lightning round versions? Anne, you want to do a lightning round question?
If you just want to ask the questions, I can follow up another time. But I would love to hear what the questions are. Or comments.
That was great.
Encouragement.
And I wish it could go on. I have lots of different questions and comments, but I guess one would be, and I'm sorry, I had to come in late because my work is overwhelming.
Please.
I guess playing off of just connecting with the last thing that you said, Kyra, is what is the role of artists? Megan Thee Stallion's album's coming out on Friday, and she's been talking a lot about how she had this great metaphor that I loved about wanting to be the spoon in the Kool-Aid that stirs it up and amplifies women's pride, Black women's pride.
Yeah.
But what is, given the demands of capitalism and the capitalist music industry and the desire for artists like that have, and that the apparatuses around them encourage for them to continue to play a role, a self-objectifying role, as well as be, how do you see those pop star avatars of twerking as part of this work that you're doing?
I think that it's a both and. I think it's very important, the work that Megan Thee Stallion does at her concerts.
Mm.
I've been reading about, right? And that in her fan community,
Mm.
right? I was talking the other day about that I went to school with Tori Amos. And so Tori Amos has this fan, like they are an entity unto themselves. And surely every artist has that, right? And I think for women, for Black women, for brown women, for women who identify with Megan Thee Stallion or Cardi B or any of the artists, Rico Nasty,
Mm.
that that's their Shaka Khan,
Mm.
right? And it's necessary. My concern is that I have Black students in my class who will come to me, and one in particular this last year at the end of the semester of us studying this, and says, I was afraid that we would find one of my videos. And I was like, is that why you didn't talk the whole semester? And, like, I had a channel, and I'm like, why are you whispering? There's nobody else in the room.
Mm.
It's just me and her. And she's whispering about it.
Mm. Right.
And this is a big presence woman.
Mm.
She's suppressing herself the whole 14 weeks because she's concerned that when she was 13, she and her friends made videos and she doesn't remember the name of her YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they'll look upon it. And I told her, I don't know if they did or didn't. But, what kind of curse is this? What kind of scarlet letter is this that you carry around by yourself, suffering in silence? And then she says, when I meet with her, my friends and I are mean to each other. And I was like, how does this connect? There's something going on that's not fully empowering as they say it is. And I don't think it's because of the twerking. I think it's the larger culture, the lack of space in the larger culture, right? Lack of being able to be producers in the music business, lack of, those things.
All right,
So,
let me be that person. Lauren, you want to ask one last question?
It was more of a comment than a question. no, but going off of that, I'm struck, in my work in New Orleans, working with bounce artists, the invective is for everyone to dance, right? And as you said, twerking is just one motion, one gesture associated with shaking, which is a larger dance culture. But everyone's invited, right?
Yeah.
But if there's something about this YouTube medium that takes away that participatory culture aspect of being in that space and has made it, has exposed it to certain kind of gazes that always already interpret twerking as sexual, even though it's not inherently sexual, right? So maybe you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I think that it doesn't matter what dance has been when it comes to the Black female body. When I was dancing in an African drum and dance ensemble at UVA when I first started teaching, lots of people come up and say, the dance is so sexual. And my dear friend and white colleague was like, no, it isn't. And I'm like, why can't it be sexual or sensual? Why can't Black people have a full spectrum of humanity? Why can't students, let's be real, why can't students have a full spectrum of humanity in the classroom? To be able to talk about their identity, the whole of it, not just be somebody who turns in papers and gets grades, right? The Student is Nigger. It's a wonderful book if you've never seen it, along with, so that's all I'll say. And I just want to thank you, Lauren, for being here. Thank you, Regina and Aria and Alisha, Anne, and Eric. Thank you for tolerating our additional time.
No, absolutely great. And thank you as well. I'll just sign off real quick by reminding people that next week we've got Joanna Love and Steve Waxman talking about live music at the Super Bowl and beyond. And thanks again to Kyra, the Sister Circle, and this amazing topic.